Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and I am so excited to be celebrating 10 years of meaningful conversations with you. As we step into our new primetime hour, it's such an honor to share this exciting new chapter with you. So whether you're starting your day out, headed to work, or listening from wherever you are, this hour is designed to bring you thoughtful dialogue, fresh insight, and inspiring stories so you can make every moment count. So thank you for being here with me today, and let's dive in. We're here today with special guest, Angela Costa Simoes, who's here to share with us her new children's book, Milagre of the Rosas. What if one young queen's compassion could stop wars, feed the hungry, and inspire generations across the world? Well, today's guest is here to share with us this inspiring story. Angela Costa Simoes is a bilingual author dedicated to celebrating Portuguese language and culture through books that connect generations. Writing in both Portuguese and English, her work supports language preservation, cultural pride, and meaningful storytelling for families navigating bilingual and bicultural lives. So welcome to the show, Angela Costa Simoes.
Thank you, Marianne. So happy to be here.
My goodness, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this book. What inspired you to write this, especially for children?
Yes. So a little bit of my own background. I'm Portuguese by heritage and grew up in the Portuguese community. And here in California, a major part of our culture and our community are Holy Ghost festivals, which we refer to as festas. And the festas were started because of Queen St. Isabel. And so I've known about her my whole life, and I've known about the Miracle of the Roses. And so fast forward, I had a career in tech public relations and never once thought about becoming a children's book author. And then we had our daughter. My husband is also Portuguese. We really wanted her to grow up learning the language and couldn't really find the right kind of books. So I'm not fluent, unfortunately. And so I couldn't read to her Portuguese children's books because I didn't know what they said. And so I was looking for bilingual books. And so I started writing bilingual children's books in both Portuguese and English. I have a few. And when I was thinking about the next one I wanted to write, I was thinking about it would be important to preserve some of these stories in our culture that have been handed down primarily orally, right? And I think you can go on websites and there's, adult books written about her life. But I wondered how many of the children participating in these festas still here in California really know her story and who she was. And so that's really what inspired me to make the next book about her life.
Well, I understand that Queen Isabel is remembered for compassion and generosity. Why do you think those themes still resonate today?
Yes, she, from a very early age, dedicated her life to prayer, feeding the poor, helping the sick. She opened homes for women, opened hospitals. She completely dedicated her life to giving back and helping those in need. And I think that resonates so well today. I mean, I think at any point in history, but especially today, because I feel like all of us are struggling in one way, shape, or form. Even if we're able to pay our bills, we may not be happy every day and not be experiencing life the way we should be. And so, a simple act of kindness or a simple act of generosity can go a long way for someone who might not be having a great day. And then, of course, on a grander scale, our world is still in need of helping the sick, feeding the poor. Lots of people are still struggling to put food on the tables. And so I think it's still a very, very relevant story and lesson to learn.
Can you share a little bit about her story for us, especially for people who have never heard her story?
Sure. So she actually was born in Zaragoza, Spain, and at a very early age, as it was common back in those days in the 1700s, she was betrothed to a king in the neighboring region, and so she was married off at 11, and then. So she became queen to King Denis of Portugal. And right away, again, she dedicated her life to prayer and helping the poor. And as she got older, the one interesting thing about Portuguese queens is that they actually earned their own income. So they weren't completely dependent on the king to give them an allowance or anything like that. So she managed her own villages and, however else you earned income that in those days. And so everything she earned, she put back into her people, right? Again, opening hospitals, opening schools, opening homes for women, feeding the poor. And throughout her life, became very beloved by her people because of it. And not only was she generous, but she was known as a peacemaker because, again, as is common in those days, kind of lots of fighting, people, arguing over territory, and so she would write letters to her family members, her uncles, and other family members, please stop fighting. And then at some point, her son and her husband actually went to war over territory, and so she prayed to the Holy Spirit to say, please give me the strength to stop this war. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but please give me the strength to stop this war. And so she said, if you give me the strength to do this, I will throw a feast for the entire village and feed everybody for free. And so she rode out onto the battlefield and she threw up her arms and said, please stop fighting. And she talked to both her husband and her son, and she was able to get them to stop fighting. And so that is actually the real reason that our community to this day still holds these festas where we feed hundreds and sometimes thousands of people for free. And so that happens annually in lots of different cities across California and in Canada and even on the East Coast of the United States. So that was the original impetus for the festas, and she did that actually twice. So when she was an older woman, she it was her nephew and her grandson that were at war again. And again, she prayed to the Holy Spirit, give me the strength. And she rode out of the battlefield, please stop fighting. And she was able to get them to stop fighting. The Miracle of the Roses, actually, she's, in her 20s. And King Denis at the time was not such a nice guy. He's very business minded, as kings are, and didn't think that, feeding the poor and being generous in that way was really that necessary. And so she had to resort to sneaking out of the castle, hiding food in her cloak, to give to the poor. And so one day he caught her. It was January. It was a cold winter day. And he said, what are you doing? What do you have in your cloak? And she said, oh, I have flowers. I'm going out to the garden. And he said, flowers in January? I don't think so. Show me what's in your cloak. And so she opened her cloak and outpoured red and pink roses. And so that is what is known as the Miracle of the Roses. And I think that's what she's most famous for. So when you see statues of her, it's always with roses in her cloak. And so, yeah, so that's kind of about her life. But, even after she then moved to a different town in Portugal where she continued she opened a hospital there and just really spent the rest of her life helping people.
Sounds like she was way ahead of her time, which is just interesting because at that time, I think so many people were just struggling to survive.
Right, right. I mean, if we think we have it hard now, I mean, back then the life expectancy wasn't very long at all. And so yeah, it was a really tough time. And for her to really just give everything she had to helping people was just so it's hard to imagine that level of selflessness and generosity, really.
Well, I love how your book really highlights kindness as a form of strength. Why
Mhm.
was that message important for children to hear?
As we all know, social media, kids are increasingly on their phones and socializing less. And I feel like, the bullying has increased, and, people say things online that they wouldn't say to each other in person. And so I think we really need to get back to a sense, that being kind is really important. It costs nothing to be kind. Even if you're having a bad day and you're, at the grocery store and someone, happens to be rude, a smile, maybe they're having a bad day and have a smile, um, wish them a good day. Sorry if you're having a bad day, something like that. Just an act of kindness, I think, can go a really long way. And for kids to learn that early on and to be kind to each other, I think, hopefully that will, in a generation or two, we will feel like, I don't know, that the world in general is more kind. I think sometimes we go out into the world and we just kind of feel like this heaviness and like, oh God, everybody is just so grumpy and struggling. And I think if we can just change our mindset a little bit and instill kindness and in our everyday actions, I think it would make the world a better place.
I think we can all use that, and starting children off at a young age learning these life lessons,
Yeah.
I think it's so important.
It really is. And again, it takes nothing away from you personally to be kind. It costs nothing to be kind. Nothing bad will ever come from being kind, right? Only good can come from that. And I think if kids can truly understand and embrace that, I think they'll grow up with a much more positive mindset and be more successful and happy in life.
I love how Queen Isabel really was a champion for peace over conflict,
Yeah.
throughout her life. What can modern, families learn today from her example?
Sometimes I think about her devotion to peacemaking, and when you think about your own family conflicts and maybe you're not speaking to a family member or there was a fight recently. I mean, it's hard to forgive and kind of move forward and not be stuck in a grudge where you're like, no, but it was their fault and they need to apologize. And I think if we can take anything from her life is that the more that we can just let things go and, see the importance of family and positive relationships and, you know, eh, again, being kind, nothing bad could ever come from that. Holding a grudge and, not speaking to your family anymore, that doesn't feel good. That's not a great thing. So, not saying you have to be best friends with the person you're fighting with, but at least just letting it go in your heart and forgiving them and maybe praying for them, even if they don't know that you're praying for them, just pray that they are happy and having a good life. So yeah, it's a tough thing though, I will say. That's not something that comes easy or I think naturally for most of us. So it takes some work, and she's inspirational in that way.
Was she sainted?
Yes, she was, and I don't know what year, but she is a saint. Yes.
Thank you. I just
Hmm.
was so curious about that. I thought I'd heard about Saint Isabella, so I just wanted to make sure. I mean, what
Yeah.
kind of conversations do you hope parents and children will have after reading this book together?
Oh, that's a great question. I imagine that, maybe the question similar to what you have asked about, how can we be kind to people every day? Maybe at school, or can you think of a time when you were kind to somebody? Or can you think of a time where maybe you weren't kind, but you should have been, or something like that, right? So I think that would be important. Or what can we do as a family to help people? Maybe on a Saturday we go volunteer, or can we put together some food baskets, or what is it that we can do as a family to follow St. Isabel's example of caring for the sick and helping the poor, right? So those kinds of conversations I think are important because we're so caught up in soccer practice and band and Girl Scouts and other activities and school recitals and things like that, that sometimes we just don't even have time to think about what are some of these other more generous, helpful things that we could do to make our community better, right? And so taking the time to have those conversations and involving the kids to get their ideas, I think then they'll be more invested and want to do it and get joy out of doing it, right? So I think that would be a great thing for parents to have those conversations as a result of this book.
Well, I really love that it is in English and Portuguese.
Hmm.
So it really is available for a broader audience to go ahead and read.
Yeah, and that was very deliberate, as I said in the beginning. For parents that want their kids to learn another language, but maybe they are not bilingual. This is a great way for them to learn right alongside of their children. And it's not just for Portuguese families. I find that, a lot of families are. And people are interested in the Portuguese culture. Portugal has become a lot more popular in the last 10 years as a destination. I feel like a lot of people are moving there, especially from the United States. So, and as a way to just expose yourself to a different culture, this is a great way for parents to learn right alongside their kids.
Well, I love, and you mentioned this when we first started talking about how this story deeply connects with Portuguese culture and the Holy Spirit festivals. Why
Hmm.
is it so important to preserve those traditions in this book?
Growing up in the community, it played such an important role for me personally. Not that I wasn't really like bullied at school or anything, but I never really, fit in. I was kind of a little bit odd, but I always felt so comfortable and so at home at the Portuguese festivals. And it really helped shape my identity. And I feel like that might be the case for a lot of people. And it also just is so unique to the Portuguese culture. And I think it's important for any culture to preserve these kinds of stories and traditions because it makes us unique. But then I think it also demonstrates that there are similarities between cultures. Because I'm sure that if you talked to any other Latin American or European culture, that there are probably some very similar stories like this one. But it helps to foster that sense of pride in where you come from, and I think that's really important for a lot of people. At least it was for me. And so, yeah, I think these kinds of stories can really help provide a sense of belonging and identity, especially during a time when children may be struggling to find a place where they belong, right? Those formative years when you just want to be cool and you just want to, do I want to be like everybody else or do I want to be different? So I think this helps provide a place where they can be different and be proud of it.
Was there a particular part of this book that was maybe emotional or very meaningful for you to write?
I think towards the end, it shows how the feast has become the festa, and that our community continues to do that. And so some of the illustrations show people who work, really long hours, and there are people who dedicate their lives to putting on these festas, and they're working hours and hours in the kitchen and setting up, and a lot of them are elderly. I'm happy to see a lot of the younger generations taking over. And so much of that work goes like thankless, right? Like people don't they're like invisible almost sometimes. And so I think that was emotional to realize that they're really continuing Isabel's legacy. And I don't know if they truly understand that, but I think for us, it's a very, very special thing. You don't really see that kind of dedication a lot anymore. And so for those that continue to do it, it's really, really special.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I just love how in your book you show so much of how Queen Isabel acted so quietly and so humbly. And it
Yes.
sounds like the people are continuing in that spirit, as you're saying, by being of service and helping and being there to help feed everybody.
Yeah, it really was. I think I like the way you put that. She really never asked for recognition or anything. She just rolled up her sleeves and got to work, and did what needed to be done, despite whether she had a crown on or not, So I really love that about her.
Well, especially throughout history, I mean, women haven't really had a very substantial place where they can make a lot of decisions. So to be
Hmm.
able to impact history in the way that she has, it's so
Hmm.
profound.
It really is. And to have such a strong legacy, so, hundreds and hundreds of years later, um, is truly astonishing. And I hope she's proud. I hope she's happy with what we're doing.
Well, it's amazing how acts of kindness can live on, especially when it's in a book that we're teaching young people about because we're filling their minds with something that is meaningful and impactful.
Yeah, very much so. And again, in a time where, they're dealing with their own struggles at school, I think it's hopefully comforting if they read a book like this and see that acts of kindness really can make a big difference, and they'll be inspired to do the same.
Well, your book really shows how one person can make such a difference through compassion.
Hmm.
Was that one of the central messages that you hoped readers take away from this book?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think sometimes we think that, oh, I'm just one person. How am I going to impact the world? I'm not going to be able to make a difference. I can't save the world. And which is true, we can't save the world as individuals, but it doesn't really take grand gestures, right? Sometimes, as I was saying earlier, it's a simple, you know, hello or a smile to somebody that was maybe having a really bad day. And so I think having an attitude of compassion and gratitude that you can just pass on in your daily actions to people, I think just changes the vibe all around us, changes the energy. And if we can be somebody that radiates the kindness energy, the loving energy, I think that, you know, that'll really affect those around us, and hopefully they will pass it on, they'll pay it forward. And I think that has a huge impact on the world in general, and we can do that as individuals. We don't have to make any grand donations monetarily. We don't have to do any sort of grand gestures. Just putting positive energy and kindness out into the world changes the force, if you will. Not to get too woo woo, but it changes the vibe out there.
Well, I understand there are so many Catholic and Christian families that are just loving this book and being able to share this with their family and have something positive that they're putting into their child's minds. What do you want families to really think of as they're sharing this book with their children?
There's a few things that come to mind. I think one aspect is something that we talked about before, which is maybe we talk more proactively about kindness and what it means to take care of our community and make our community a better place as a family. But then even like as parents, thinking about how we interact with our own families and with our children. Again, things can be stressful with all of our activities and clean up your room and you left your shoes on the stairs and, just kind of the stresses of every day. And it's very easy to kind of get snippy, right? And so, and I find personally, struggle with this every day where take a breath and not, I'm not a believer in gentle parenting necessarily, but I also try to not yell every day, as would be my natural reaction to things. But just, being kind to our kids and being kind to our spouse, even when maybe we feel like they haven't been kind enough to us. Again, changing the vibe, changing the energy, putting some positivity and kindness out there, and so hopefully that will come back and serving as the example, right? If we want our kids to be nice, then we have to be nice, and so I think serving as a role model, and modeling that kindness, I think, is something that we as parents should really think about also.
I understand you have several other books. I'd love to hear about them.
Yes, so I have 8 total for now, and I have a long list of other ones that I would like to write. The first one was inspired by our daughter. It's called Linda Menina, which means pretty girl in Portuguese. And it's a very, very simple book about, I wake her up in the morning and we smile at each other, and the mother is just telling her all sorts of positive affirmations like, "Oh my gosh, look at your strong feet and your long fingers and your beautiful hair," and all these kinds of things, right? So just really making her feel good. And then there's a counterpart, which is the very same message, but for lindo menino, which is handsome boy. There's one about learning your numbers, colors, and fruits in Portuguese and English. And then that's kind of when I started the idea of I should probably use this opportunity to start preserving some of our experiences in our culture. And the first book in that theme that I wrote was Maria and John Go to the Festa. Maria e João vão à festa. And that literally was kind of a documentation of my experience as a kid going to the festas, where we go to the dance and we see our cousins and we're running around and we're eating, the linguiça sandwiches. It's just like everything that I remember as a kid that I loved so much about going to the festas. And that's very much a diaspora experience. It's a very much a Portuguese American experience. And there are really no other books that document that experience. So I thought that was important because there are so many of us. There's 1.5 million of us in the United States, and no one's documenting our experience. And so that was really fun to write. The other next one was The Legend of the Barcelos Rooster, which is a good luck rooster. And if you've ever been to anybody that's Portuguese to their home, there's probably a very colorful rooster sitting on their windowsill in their kitchen. It's a symbol of good luck. And again, very much an oral history type of story, and there's different versions of it. And so I thought it was important to preserve in a written format. And then there's a very iconic song called Uma Casa Portuguesa, a Portuguese home, that I think most Portuguese people know, or at least have heard, but maybe don't know the history of the song and really what the lyrics mean. And so that book just sort of documents the lyrics and puts some illustrations to it to really bring it to life for children, especially. And it's all about, the Portuguese home is a humble home. There's always food and drink on the table. Anybody can come knock at our door and they're going to be invited in to sit down and have a meal with us. Our humbleness is our quote unquote weakness is our strength, in that regard. And so, of course, this is a Portuguese home. So it's really, I love that. I love the song. And then I love the book that resulted from it. And then I just also recently published one about flowers. So, I like flowers, and it's all about the different flowers and how they're magical and smell delicious and are beautiful. And so, yeah, so I like flowers. So yeah, it's been really fun coming up with the different ideas to write about. And I hope I'm able to do this for a long time.
Well, I just loved your book. I thought it was such a beautiful read, Miracle of the Roses, for any child, even adults, to really dive into with their children or nieces and nephews. Any kids
Mhm.
around, it's a great book to read. Where can people
Thank you.
connect with you, Angela, and be part of your community?
So I do have a website. It's Riso Books, RISO Books.com. We are also on Facebook and Instagram. So yeah, you can find us there. On Instagram and Facebook is Riso Books. So just do a quick search and we'll be there. All the books are available on Amazon.
Well, Angela, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you so much, Marianne. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Angela. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new children's book, Miracle of the Roses. Make sure to visit Angela's website at rizobooks.com, that's RISO books.com, for more information on her work and to be part of her community. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.